So good morning. My name is Jessica Hall, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you as CalSPA President to this highly anticipated webinar on the fascinating and evolving topic of artificial intelligence, AI, in the realm of school communications. I am truly delighted to see such a diverse and esteemed group of school communicators gathered here today for the first in our three-part series on AI. I want to extend my sincere appreciation to each of you for joining us, and especially our San Diego crew for gathering so many together to participate. So in this era of rapid technological advancements, AI has emerged as a groundbreaking force that is reshaping industries and transforming the way we live, work, and communicate. As communications professionals in public education, it is essential for us to stay ahead of the curve and leverage the immense potential of AI to enhance our outreach efforts, engage with our audiences, and ultimately create a positive impact on the students, families, and communities that we serve. Today's webinar is designed to be an enlightening journey into the realm of AI, exploring its vast array of applications in the field of school communications. We will delve into AI, specifically ChatGPT, and equip you with the knowledge and insights necessary to harness the power of AI effectively. We will also briefly cover the effects or possible effects on classrooms, teaching, and learning so that participants are ready to answer media questions on the topic when they arise. I encourage you to actively participate and ask questions as we engage in discussions throughout the webinar. This platform serves as an opportunity for us to learn from one another, exchange ideas, and foster a vibrant community of school communications professionals who are at the forefront of embracing AI's potential. Please place your questions in the chat, and if we need further clarification, we'll ask you to unmute. You can ask your questions throughout the webinar. We are recording today's webinar and we'll email it along with the slideshow to all registrants. So to begin, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Tom Moriarty, Professor of English and Director of the Writing Across the Curriculum program at San Jose State University. His work focuses on political rhetoric and communication, speeches, debates, and campaign advertising. He is the author of Finding the Words, a rhetorical history of South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy. He holds a doctoral degree in writing and rhetoric from Purdue University. We welcome him today to share with us practical knowledge that you can immediately apply in your roles, helping you navigate the exciting intersection of AI and education. Welcome, Dr. Moriarty, and please take it away.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Jessica. And thank you to all of you for joining me today for this presentation. And a big thank you to Trinette for reaching out to me and helping to set this up. Thank you so much for thinking of me. It's my real pleasure to be with all of you. I guess I'll get started with some of my slides here. Like Jessica said, I'm a professor of English and writing and rhetoric at San Jose State. And like schools everywhere, as soon as ChatGPT came out back in December, it became the #1 issue and the thing that everybody's talking about on campus. As my role of director of the Writing Across the Curriculum program, I had the great fortune to be able to organize a series of talks on ChatGPT and AI, which we held at San Jose State. And so I've been learning a lot about it, probably along with all of you as you're learning about it as it's slowly infiltrating everything we do, it seems, on our jobs or in our jobs, and also some of our online activities. So anyways, thank you so much for having me. Let me start with my screen share. And like Jessica said, if at any point you have a question that you'd like to ask, please put it into the chat. And Jessica and Trinette will be monitoring the chat, and then they'll interrupt me and I can kind of answer your question that way. We have a lot of participants, so it's hard to see everybody all on the big, gigantic Zoom screen. So it'd be kind of hard if you waved at me, I'd probably miss you. So please put it in the chat. Okay. Okay, everything is looking good. Like I said, I'm at San Jose State University. There's my email address. So if at any time after the presentation you want to send me an email, ask follow-up questions or anything like that, please feel free. Um, What I would actually be curious about is for all of you, please put in the chat, because what I'm going to do afterwards, I'm going to take a look at the chat transcript because it's kind of hard to follow the chat as you're talking. But I'm always really curious to learn about, the people who I work with and get to meet in these seminars and workshops. And so in the chat, please take a moment at some point, let me know your name, where you work. I'm always curious about where people are physically, especially now that we could do all this cool stuff via the Zoom and we're all together. And then the third thing, and this is really probably mostly for my curiosity, tell me something interesting or surprising about your job that someone like me wouldn't know about. And like I said, afterwards, I'll take a look at the chat and just I'm very curious to read about this stuff. So thank you all for joining us. Let me begin by saying that this talk will be a little bit meta, and not meta in the newly rebrand name of Facebook, which now goes by Meta because of the metaverse, but that it's going to be, I want you to sort of, as we're going through the webinar today and chatting about these things and trying out ChatGPT, is sort of pay attention to how it works. And we're going to be using ChatGPT quite a bit to show you how it works, what it can do, and its limitations. And the more you use ChatGPT, you're going to kind of get a sense of how it tends to be a little bit formulaic. And that's because ChatGPT, at bottom, it's imitative. It mimics us. It mimics the way that we write and the way that we put words and sentences together, which no doubt is extraordinarily helpful, but you'll also kind of learn is relatively limited in some ways, and it's very acontextual. So just a little heads up, this will be a little bit meta. If you have a question, this was me trying to guess how we'd run it before we got here, but we'll just do the type something in the chat and we'll do it that way. I'll just say unmute and interrupt me. We might have just, chaos. Okay, so let's begin with the very basic question is, what is ChatGPT? And in order to find out what ChatGPT is, I asked ChatGPT to speak for itself. So I go to ChatGPT, I've created an account, and type in a very simple question. I said to ChatGPT, so what is ChatGPT? And here's what ChatGPT told me. Explained it's a large language model, uses a transformer neural network architecture, and it's been trained on a wide range of topics and can provide information and engage discussions. They even provide creative outputs, such as writing stories and things like that, generating code. And it's been used in a variety of applications, including chatbots, virtual assistants, content generation, and more. Okay, so then I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And this is one of the things you can do with ChatGPT. You can refine its output by asking it other questions. I said, well, could you maybe explain all of that again? But this time, for school PR professionals, such as yourselves. And ChatGPT said, certainly, for school PR professionals, ChatGPT is an advanced language model developed by blah, blah, blah. And as school professionals, you understand the importance of effective communication with students, parents, staff, and the broader community. ChatGPT can assist you in this by providing an automated system capable of generating human-like responses to inquiries, concerns, or requests for information. Let me let it finish generating here. ChatGPT has been trained on a vast amount of text data from the internet, which enables it to understand and generate coherent text in response to prompts or questions. With ChatGPT, you can improve efficiency and responsiveness by automating some of your communication processes. I'm just reading a couple of first sentences for you. You can also use ChatGPT to draft content, such as newsletters, press releases, or announcements. It's important to note that while ChatGPT is a powerful tool, it should be used as a complement to your experience and not as a replacement. It's crucial to review and verify the generated responses before sharing them, ensuring that they align with your school's values, policies, and the specific context of your communication. In summary, ChatGPT could be a valuable resource for school PR professionals by automating routine tasks, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what you sort of notice is that the two responses are kind of similar, except they've thrown in a couple of words here and there to say, oh, well, as a PR professional, you could use it this or that way. So I thought, okay, could you maybe explain this again? You can see my terrible typing. This time for school PR professionals who are very good looking. And so this time then, ChatGPT tells us, well, for exceptionally good looking school PR professionals, ChatGPT is an advanced language model. And then as school PR professionals, your striking looks and excellent communication abilities make you an asset to your institution. ChatGPT can further elevate your impact by providing an automated system capable of generating human-like responses to inquiries, concerns, and requests for information. ChatGPT has been trained on blah, blah, blah. With ChatGPT, you can become more efficient. You can also use it to draft content, same material occurring again and again with some kind of cliched little phrases thrown in because it now knows that not only are you school PR professionals, you're very good looking school PR professionals. And so finally then I thought, wow, ChatGPT is really good. Turns out that one of our members here today, and I just saw this in the chat, works actually at a school for pirates. And could ChatGPT explain all of this again, but this time for pirates and pirates in training. And of course, ChatGPT is happy to oblige. Our matey, for ye swashbuckling school PR professionals, sailing the seas of a pirate school, ChatGPT be a treasure worth discovering. As a matey skilled in the ways of school PR, ye know the importance of clear communication among pirates and pirates in training, as well as their kin and the wider pirate community. With ChatGPT by your side, you can hoist efficiency high on the mizzen mast. That's one of my favorite lines. If you can it can handle mundane questions and so on and so forth. When it comes to content creation, it can be a true companion, provided with a prompt and a desired tone, like I did, and suddenly it produces content suitable for pirates. And it uses such great words as avast.
Here, we're watching this AI.
And to sum it all up, ChatGPT be a bounty, oh assistance for ye pirate school PR professionals. So taking all of that together, so what is ChatGPT? All right, what we learned from ChatGPT is that it's an advanced language model developed by OpenAI. That's the company that developed it. And it is designed to generate human-like text responses and conversation-like interactions. All right. It has been trained on a large amount of internet text data to learn language patterns and relationships. That's a key thing, is what it has been trained on is language patterns, what tends to happen when we put together words and sentences in responses to certain types of queries. What the model does is it predicts the most probable next word or sequence of words based on the context that it receives. So when people ask about this or that in this or that way, this is what they expect to get back. It gives you back the formulaic, cliched, expected answer. And the reason why, and this will become apparent in the next couple of slides, is because it's trained to just simply guess what is the next letter that tends to appear, or what is the next word that tends to appear in this type of sentence, okay? So how does it work? ChatGPT produces text by generating sentences one word or sequence of words at a time. And it does that by generating the words that are most likely to appear next in a sentence based on the corpus of text that it's been trained on. And so this version of ChatGPT was trained on trillions and trillions of different texts, just all skimmed off the internet. It's all the stuff on the internet. And it just, statistically speaking, when a question like this is asked with these words or these contextual parameters are given to it, what tends to appear next? Okay, it's a great imitator or mimic of us, and it does what we tend to do. One of the key things about ChatGPT and all of these, generative AI models is that they don't actually think. They just simply statistically guess what tends to come next. And now, how was ChatGPT built? Or in the business, they call it trained. And it's based on what they call the generative pre-trained transformer architecture. And it's been trained on a large amount of internet text data to learn language patterns and relationships. And it predicts the most probable next word or sequence of words based on the context it receives. And that's the key thing. It just predicts what tends to come next. That's why it tends to become very formulaic over time, if you think about it, or in some ways, almost kind of cliche. So when I was putting in those different parameters and saying, well, we're a bunch of good looking PR professionals, or, we work at a pirate school, it kind of threw in a set of cliches, which you sort of cringe at. If you actually were to receive that in a communication from someone, you'd be like, oh man, that's pretty bad. So generative pre-trained transformer, those bullet points came from ChatGPT. I actually asked ChatGPT, my next one, which I didn't show you, I said, hey, could you put this in bullet points for me? And it gave me those previous bullet points, right? Turns out that some of the best explanations that I've seen so far about how ChatGPT works have come from human journalists. And these are the two sources that I'll draw from for these next couple of slides. I saw something vaguely in the chat about a question. Is that something you wanted to ask now or later?
Yeah, I can ask now. So does ChatGPT first consider the content associated with the requester's IP address? Does it connect to, who's asking the question at all?
This version does not. That's not to say that they're not working on versions that will do that and connect it to your IP address and potentially connect it to every keystroke you have ever put in from that IP address. I'm sure that's, yeah.
Thanks.
So this is a very simple explanation from Atish Bhatia from the New York Times. And so how was it trained? And they, they say that the inner workings of these algorithms are notoriously opaque, but it's a simple idea. They're trained by going through mountains of text, repeatedly guessing the next few letters, and then grading themselves against the real thing. That's how it's trained. It goes through and it sort of guesses what would come next. And then it goes back and looks at the text and see, well, how much did I get right? And then it learns to become a better predictor. That's the learning that goes on behind these text generating forms of AI. Okay, there's no actual thinking. It's just learning how to be a better predictor. What tends to come next? What tends to come next? Hey, I got it right. Okay, what tends to come next? And that whole generative pre-trained transformer thing, again, from Bhatia. So the GPT in ChatGPT, the G is generative, simply because it generates words. The P is pre-trained. It's trained on a bunch of texts. So this, they went through mountains of text and practiced, essentially, guessing what comes next and grading itself and getting better at it. And then the transformer part is really it's a little vague. It's a little vague to me because I'm not a computer scientist. I'm an English professor. Um, but I guess that it's a transformer because what they did is they've trained the neural network or the set of computers that they're using to process words in parallel rather than one at a time. So that just makes it much faster. So when ChatGPT is given a sentence, it can consider the sentence like all the words at once instead of just one word at a time in terms of its learning and training. And so that's what the GPT means. And I saw something slightly in the chat. What did it say?
Yeah, so as opposed to asking it to create content, what are your thoughts on using it to edit text that you provide?
That's an interesting question. Wow, I have not tried that. Yeah, this is great. As soon as I'm done with this, I got to try that this afternoon with the editing.
You can
I
try it right now.
know, sure. One of the it's interesting. I know there's people trying to use applications of generative AI to grade work. And there we go. In the chat, we're seeing that people have tried it and it has done a good job with it. Could I ask a question back? For those of you who've tried it, does it simply edit it or does it also improve and expand on the content for you? How robust is its editing capabilities?
Adam, Melissa, Jamie, or Christine, anybody want to share their, it usually improves and it
Wow.
depends on the prompt. Okay. And you can set parameters and scope.
There are a number of people who are working on what they call prompt engineering, which is coming up with better prompts to get better results from ChatGPT. Yeah, so yeah, it can definitely do that. It's the editor we always wished we had. So on to the next couple of slides is.
Can I ask one question before you start?
Sure.
So what about adding into ChatGPT something to edit, but it's confidential information? If you share it in there, is it still confidential? Is there a confidentiality concern?
Yes. One of the big concerns right now is the confidentiality. One of the basic agreements that you make when you sign up to use ChatGPT is everything that you input to it becomes part of its large language model. So it becomes part of the database or the model that it's using to become better and better at generating text. And so yes, confidentiality is a huge issue with it because anything that you input into it becomes part of it. To show you an example of how it learns, Batia and their colleagues built what they called a baby GPT and then only trained it on a small set of texts. And I'll show you 3 of their examples. What they did is they trained it on all of Jane Austen's books. And then another one, they trained it on Star Trek scripts. And then another one, they trained it on all the Harry Potter books. One of the things that I vaguely just caught out of the corner of my eye in the text as well is people were talking about the costs for the GPTs. Currently, the basic Chat GPT, the 3.5, is free. However, there is a $20 a month version, which is GPT-4, which is not free, which I think is better and especially is trained on a more, or is being continually trained on a more modern, updated set of texts. The ChatGPT 3.5 that I'm using here and the free version that you can get from OpenAI, it was trained on texts that were on the internet through the end of 2021. So it's about a year and a half out of date now in terms of its actual knowledge. So back to the examples, you can kind of see how it becomes trained. Okay, so this is them training their baby GPT on Jane Austen. And all these links are provided at the end of my slideshow, so you can go check it out. So what happens when they begin, that's how any GPT starts. It's gibberish. That's the text that it'll produce. Because, whoops, let me roll back slightly for you. Because what it's doing is it's literally just trying to guess what is the next letter that would appear in a sentence. And it starts by it's completely random. And then what it does is it learns from that. It generates that text. And then in this case, it goes back and it looks at all the Jane Austen texts, which is what its foundational training is on. And it says, wow, these are completely wrong. Let me try again. And so then it goes for 250 rounds. So 250 rounds of guessing and training. And what you see there is it starts producing actual English letters. So it stops putting in numbers. It stops putting in symbols, because at this point it has learned, okay, look, for this base of text, there's not a lot of numbers and symbols in Jane Austen's manuscripts and all those texts. So it's just generating things like that. It's still basically nonsense. After 500 rounds of training, it starts coming up with small words. And, it doesn't quite make a lot of sense just yet, but it's starting to be words that are in English, and, it's starting to become something we might start to recognize. After 5,000 rounds of training, and training means it goes through and it makes guesses. It says, what tends to come next? And then it compares with the actual source texts and improves. And then the final one, after 30,000 rounds, it starts generating full sentences. Now, some of these sentences don't quite make sense. So the prompt it gave it is, it said, basically, could you complete this sentence or complete this paragraph or two for us? And so they gave it the prompt that says, you must decide for yourself, said Elizabeth. And then ChatGPT, or baby GPT in this case, generates rather repeatedly, that is very agreeable displeasure. They will ever be a lively young woman, as it will be more disagreeable. So it doesn't quite make sense yet, but you can see how it's slowly but surely starting to make sense as actual sentences. Then that just shows kind of the final one. Play this one. These go through a little bit quicker. This is where they trained it on Star Trek scripts, where Captain Picard says, Mr. LaForge, and then it asks baby GPT to fill it in. Again, it starts with the gibberish. It's all random. It kind of moves into English letters. Gets you to the small words. Now, in these examples, it never quite gets to English sentences that would make sense to us, because it's not built on a big enough base of text, and it hasn't gone through the millions of rounds of training that something like ChatGPT has done. But again, you can kind of see it ends up with, some full sentences, and has the characters correct now. It's putting in Mr. Data, putting in Mr. Worf, all the other folks you'd expect to see. And then finally, just for fun, show you a little bit of the Harry Potter. Again, starts with the gibberish. And it gave it the prompt, Hermione raised her wand. And then what happened next? Well, it starts generating words. And the next thing you know, you get even bigger words. It's starting to make some sense. So now imagine training a GPT on trillions of texts. And that's what they've done with ChatGPT. And so as it was trained on more and more texts and repeatedly guessing the next few letters and grading itself, it really improved and improved and improved. And then, as Batia says, as the models grow in size, they're known to develop some surprising new abilities, such as the ability to answer questions, summarize text, explain jokes. and continue a pattern and correct bugs in computer codes. And then some researchers have termed these emergent abilities because they arise unexpectedly. And one AI researcher has likened them to training a large language model to buying a mystery box, because it's difficult to predict what skills it's going to gain during its training and when these skills will emerge. Okay, let me sort of stop the share for a moment. Are there any other questions at this point? What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put everyone into breakout rooms of about 5 or 6 people and kind of give you a set of things I'd like you to try out and to play a little bit with ChatGPT, and also give you a chance to, if you want to get your lunch going or take a bathroom break, anything like that, it'll be a perfect time to do it. And I'll come visit the rooms and all that. But are there any questions at this point before we go into playing with it?
So one question, where is it getting the content from, or what is it searching to learn?
The internet.
As a whole.
It's the whole internet, yeah. Including, I think such things as like Facebook and Instagram, all those social media sites as well. And so what's real, see that, isn't there inaccurate information? Oh, yes, indeed. And it's very interesting. As you play with ChatGPT, go in there and ask it different questions, ask it about yourself. That's always interesting. I've had colleagues who've done that and it gives like wrong information. I tried it and it says there is no Thomas Moriarty at San Jose State. Or there is no Thomas Moriarty who's done anything of note at San Jose State, And so I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's us. In some ways, philosophically, if you think of the whole internet as a bizarre reflection of us, because we've input so much and interacted on it in so many different ways, ChatGPT is then a mimic of us, back to us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let me see quick in the chat. Right, so it's about my specific district. Well, that's what you're going to find. Actually, that's a very good question. You ask it to write something about your specific district. The one thing that ChatGPT so far is very bad at is context. And if you have a very specific context, it's terrible at it. If you ask it about a specific school in your district or your district, something that happened recently, something that's going on that's very contextual, it doesn't know. Instead, it has a formulaic response to that kind of thing, but it doesn't have detail, it doesn't have context. And I think at least at this point, and researchers say they're working on things to be able to do more with context. That's where we still need us, is to provide the context. And that's also where educators and teachers have the real advantage of, I guess maybe thwarting the use of ChatGPT in the classroom, is that if you have assignments and projects that are very contextual, it can't do them, because it doesn't have a good sense of context.
The other question was, can you repeat, is it 3.5 that goes to 2021? And then is the paid version more current data?
Yes and yes. And apparently the paid version, I've yet to pay for it. I have colleagues who are very interested in doing research on this. They've paid for it, and they do say it is, 10 times better than the 3.5 version. And not just in terms of its knowledge base, but being able to respond more intelligently to the queries and the parameters that you give it. So eventually it will become our robot overlords. And okay, so at this point, let me do the screen share again. And this will give you an idea of what I'd like you to do when we go into our breakout rooms. Well, number one, when you get to your breakout room, or if you haven't used ChatGPT before, that is the address. Just go to Google and type in ChatGPT, and it'll take you right to it. Two things to keep in mind: you have to create an account to use it. So if you've never used ChatGPT before, you do have to create an account and give it an email address. I know most of us have like 5 or 6 email addresses. You have your work email address and your e-commerce email address that you use when you're buying shoes on Zappos and your Amazon and all that kind of stuff. I gave it my e-commerce because I don't want it to get into my, there are privacy concerns. They say it does not go into your accounts or anything, but some people are more worried about that than others. And then keep in mind, anything you put in the ChatGPT does become a part of its large language model. So just keep that in mind. Don't put anything in there that you don't want it to know about. Okay, come on, go to the next slide. Okay, so here's what we're going to do, and we'll do it for about 25 minutes or half an hour, and I'll come and visit the different breakout rooms and pop in. And what I'd like you to do to kind of structure, you're welcome to do whatever you like. I mean, honest to goodness, the real point of this half hour is to have you really spend some time with ChatGPT and try it out if you haven't done so already. But what you might want to do is first ask yourselves what questions and issues regarding ChatGPT and other forms of AI, and especially generative AI, are you starting to encounter in your work? And what do you anticipate being asked about in your role? And then second, use ChatGPT to help you formulate some answers and messages in response. So play with it, see what it can come up with. Ask it about your district and see, but ask it other questions, see what you could use from what it produces. Because one of the themes that I'm going to develop a little bit later on is that, ChatGPT at bottom is a tool, and we'll want to think about ways that we can use it most effectively. And it could generate some great stuff for you, or give you ideas of how the genre might work, of how you might structure different communications and things like that. And then as you interact with ChatGPT, think about what it's good at and maybe what it's not so good at. And that's the stuff that we're going to share when we all come back together as a big group. So come up with some things. Basically, I'm asking you, come up with some things you might want ChatGPT to try out, and then try it. And then think about what it was pretty good at and what it was pretty bad at. All right, it looks like we're all back. And can y'all hear me? Okay, excellent. Wow, those conversations were great. I only made it to about 6 of the rooms, but I learned a lot and used a quick minute to add some things to some of my later slides, stealing what you said. So you're going to think that I can predict the future if I made these slides yesterday, but that's how I did it. Okay, so I'd like to hear from each group. If you could kind of report back some of your conversation, whatever part of your conversation you want to share with us. What you find is good about ChatGPT or bad, or other issues that came up. I know some groups were starting to talk about ethics, and this is a very, very interesting topic. So whatever you want to share with us, please feel free. Why don't we coordinate it through the chat? So I assume each group had maybe one person who might speak for the group. And if you're that person, if you could quickly put in the chat, me, or it's me, I'm the one, then we'll just kind of call on you one at a time so we can kind of direct a little bit of traffic. We got Jessica first for room 5.
Room 5. So we had a really robust discussion on digital citizenship and digital literacy. How do we have students utilizing ChatGPT, that our teachers are looking for guidelines of how to utilize it in the classroom? We have some teachers that are using it to create lesson plans and lessons and a lot of work, and some are not utilizing it all. And what is their expectation for how to utilize it in the classroom? The other piece we talked about, as you mentioned, was the ethical issues. Do we have policies on how to use it? I know we have CSBA with us today on the webinar. Do districts and county offices need to have an AI policy for their system so that people in the classroom and at the district or county office level know how we should appropriately be utilizing it? And I think the final thing is that we talked about how it is a way to transform content, not necessarily generate it, but we know that some will use it to generate it, and will that widen the achievement gap in our classrooms?
Cool, excellent, thank you. I'm making a note here, but I'll give you kind of a heads up. I love that question about policies, because I know at San Jose State, we're struggling with that right now. We don't have policies. We don't even have anything to offer people to put on their syllabi. And we're trying to think about it. So after we do this little bit of sharing, because I don't want to clog the chat, I want to be able to see who's going to talk next, is I'm going to ask you if your district or your school or anyone has any sort of policies, if you could let us know. And if you have something you can actually share, please put a link to it in the chat, because I know I'd be very curious, and I think a lot of people would be as well, to sort of see any policies that people are coming up with. But please don't do it in the chat just yet. We'll wait until we finish the sharing so it doesn't get all cluttered. Okay, I see in the chat Naomi Hunter said she was from room 7. So Naomi, you want to share?
Sure, I'm the only one from my group left, so I guess I can say whatever I want and nobody can correct me. We share different ways that we've used ChatGPT. I'm sorry that Dina isn't on the call, because Dina had some really great examples of how she had used it to, generate some key content really quickly. One of the things we talked about, though, is that there's a skill in knowing how to use it. And, we noticed in your presentation, Tom, that knowing what question to ask and how to ask the follow-up question has everything to do with the quality of the content that it yields. And so, while maybe it will replace all of our jobs eventually, there's still a lot of room for professional communicators to kind of guide the conversation. Yeah, I guess that was it. And then we also talked about ethics. I personally shared that I feel a little bit guilty when I use it. I feel like I'm cheating, or, that I'm cheating my employer, that I'm doing something that's wrong. I kind of feel I don't want people to know if I've used ChatGPT. I've only used it a little bit, but I just think that I'm not quite sure where the ethical lines are and what's okay and what's not okay. So that's just a struggle.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. It is funny. It almost seems kind of illicit right now. Like, I went to ChatGPT. Don't tell anybody. Well, eventually, I think we might get to a point where it's like, well, I ran spell check. Well, of course you ran spell check. Everybody runs spell check. Why wouldn't you run spell check? But yeah, it's interesting as the new technology comes in. Thank you. In the chat, Christine gave us a nice little write-up there. Would you want to tell us about that, Christine, or would you rather that we just read it in the chat?
Hey, Tom. We are a group of San Diego school communicators, and we got together for a lunch and learn today with you. We had a lot of fun putting in some of these sample prompts that you have in the chat to see what it would generate. And like Naomi was saying, we then asked follow-up questions to refine or customize. One of the neat things that we learned is that if you are finding that ChatGPT is just too generic and you'd like something closer to your voice, you can ask it to analyze sample texts that you've already written for your superintendent, for example. And then the prompt is, analyze this text, and then the follow-up prompt is write a blank in this voice, and so we found that got us closer to something that was usable or a better starting point.
Wow. That's all I gotta say. That is cool. Excellent. Thank you. Maria was going to tell us what room number 9 talked about.
Hi, it's Marla.
Sorry.
There were 3 of us in room 9, and 2 of us had actually used ChatGPT. we had agreed that similar to what other people have said, it's you do need to use your critical thinking when you get the response that GPT generates. Personally, I love that you can actually edit your text. I've had so many times when we're putting in a nomination or an application and you're limited to X number of words or characters, and to have just a little extra boost to trim things down, to me sounds exciting. Amy was telling us that the high school district near her had used ChatGPT for kids to check the text. Like they would enter their text into ChatGPT and then take phrases from it, paste it in Google to find out the sources of where the information came from. So that was, I thought, a really good classroom application. She also said she had all of her administrators try it out, which we hadn't done in my district, and it's just been kind of spotty. So I love the idea of, maybe getting all the teachers at a staff meeting to try it out, to get everybody started to see what kind of classroom applications might be required for this technology, because we're not going to be able to win if we fight it. We may as well embrace it and figure out how to put it in a good direction.
Cool, excellent, thank you, I agree. On to, let's see, Joy for room 2.
Hi. So in my group, it was super helpful for me because I'm somebody who's a new user. I've only used an AI probably a half a dozen times. And so I came into it with a pencil and ready to listen and write down a lot of notes. And my group was super knowledgeable. And some of the things that they said that were helpful to me that I jotted down, I'll share out. Most folks used it for taking something they've already written, they've already created, and either coming up with a catchy title, taking what they've written for one platform and figuring out how to condense it to the right number of characters for Twitter, for instance. So then not having to rewrite that, coming up with, some kind of like alliteration, some play on what the content you've already written, but making it a little bit more fun or interesting. I know a lot of times we try to make content that we're sharing out for parents be something that's not quite as technical. So someone said the language to use would be to prompt it to write, take this content, but make it something that would potentially be at like an eighth grade reading level, because a lot of times that is our litmus test for whether or not we're communicating something out in an equitable way to our families. Someone also said, if you're going to use it to come up with something, motivational, don't rely on its quote that it comes up with. It might have made something up that it thinks perhaps that, Professor Roosevelt might have said, but he didn't actually say. So instead, do your own research on the quote you want, and then tell it, include in the messaging this specific quote, so that way it gets the quote right. That was super helpful. They also said, if you were gonna try to have it generate content for you, do something more along the lines of, give me a 2-minute speech with, say 5 bullet points. So you could use that as kind of like more of your brainstorming idea, and then you actually write it, but it gives you some good like bones to go off. So my group was super helpful. Thank you, room 2.
Excellent. All right, room 2. On to Trinette for room 10.
So we actually tried it in Canva. If you guys have been in there, you do the little plus sign instead of adding an image or whatever, you can do something called Magic Write. And we had it write all the things that people are working on right now. So I'm actually going to share a Google Doc with you in the chat. It's something that is on our CalSPRA Google Drive. So we just put in things like retirement speeches, graduation speeches. One of the things we thought was interesting is we started comparing what it writes. We put in one that said, write it for a high poverty district, just to see how it would change the language or what it would do differently. And then we did one more specific to Oxnard, where it's Center East from. So we were not really super impressed with when it got to local, which is something, Tom, you already mentioned. But we really liked it when we gave it a very general prompt, like the press release that we put in there. And it just said like, okay, insert this here, insert this here, insert this here, and just kind of put together the bones for you to go in. It might save folks a lot of time.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you. And then to Rajini for room 3.
Hi, yeah, this is Ragini. We had a small group in our room, and most of us in the room had tried ChatGPT already. So we didn't use that time to actually experiment with ChatGPT. I think the conversation worked around more about the requests from teachers and their their concerns related to ChatGPT and plagiarism from students' point of view. Like where our students are going to be using it, and how do you, so we talked about Turnitin, and and then the how the plagiarism, the similarity check for Turnitin isn't as reliable as some of them would like it to be. And how in our district, I shared something that we've done in our district. We've been exploring this for the past 4 months, and we've had multiple training sessions and information sessions for our staff, where me and a couple of my other colleagues go out to the teachers and present and have an opportunity to share with them what ChatGPT is, how they can use it for themselves, because our method to really get them on board was first show them what they can do with it. Then maybe they'll be more open to having students explore it, because there's that wall I'm sure all of you are facing with the educators, where they want to shut it down. And so that's kind of where we are at. They want us to write policy. We did tell them that we're not ready for policy writing yet. We're waiting for a larger, movement from the state regarding the policies. And so that's kind of what we sort of shared about ChatGPT.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you everybody for all the great conversations and sharing out. At this point, if you have anything related to policies that you could share that's publicly shareable, please put that in the chat now. At the end of today's webinar, I'm going to save the chat, and then we'll go through and make sure we share it with everybody. So if you have anything that you can cut and paste and put in there, please share it with us now. And I appreciate that. I'm going to move on to a couple more slides to kind of summarize things based on my visiting some of the groups, and also some of my guessing from 2 or 3 days ago when I was putting together the slideshow. 2 themes that kind of came up in the group discussions that I thought were fascinating was, one, the use of ChatGPT to transform content is really kind of cool. And it's different from what I've heard a lot of students talking about, at least at the university level. They seem to be more focused on ChatGPT creating their content or generating the content. And it's just really interesting to listen to professionals who are professional writers and communicators like all of us, how we're seeing some real use and value for having it transform the content, either to maybe change the tone or to change it for different platforms, because now we have all these different social media platforms that you got to push things out on. And that's really interesting. And then also, and I'm starting to wonder if this is, a difference between expert writers and beginning writers, is we tend to think of it as a part of the writing process, or we think of it as in a different part of the writing process than maybe beginning writers do. So those are 2 interesting themes that have come up that I'm going to steal from your great conversation and bring it back to my colleagues, and they'll be like, man, you are on it, Moriarty. Where do you get these ideas? I'll be like, well, it's genius. I just sit in my office and I think them. So thank you. That's really cool. Like I said, if there's anything else you want to put in the chat, please do so. And like I said, we'll save that. Let me go back to a little bit of screen share and hopefully try to be moving a little bit towards some summary. Okay, so there we go. We get all that. We reported back. And Here's some things in general that ChatGPT is good at. Number one, obviously, is imitation. It's good at imitating sort of the general thing that we might want. It's good at routine interactions and communications. There's a certain amount and a fair amount of communication is kind of routinized. And so it's useful for that. It's very good for giving us a sense of the genre of what is usually done. And this will be something that will continue when we talk about its usefulness for teachers and students. And it's not a bad thing since a lot of, communication is formulaic and somewhat generic. And then, which I really learned from this group today, this idea of transforming your content rather than actually just generating the content. What is ChatGPT not so good at? Originality, because it's imitative and mimetic. It just imitates us. And it doesn't actually think. That's one thing I think is important to keep in mind, is that this form of AI doesn't actually think, it just predicts. It's a statistical model that allows it to predict things very accurately, almost eerily so, but that's all it's doing. It really does struggle with context or specificity. It can't write a message about what happened in your district today because it doesn't know, and it can't know. And, it's rather generic in its output, which is both good and bad. So then what are the concerns for educators, students, and parents? Overall, it's cheating. That's the number one concern, for teachers, is that the students won't do original work. There's no actual learning going on. If you just put in some parameters or ask ChatGPT a question, what good is that? That's really not that hard. We're going to skip the brainstorming part, for the purposes of time. And we're also reporting back from the groups with lots of good brainstorming. I think it's useful to kind of talk a little bit about, so how can teachers productively use ChatGPT? And I think there's a couple of things. Number one, we can develop policies to govern the use of it. And one thing that a lot of my professor colleagues are starting to do is they're asking students to cite ChatGPT material, just like you'd quote from a source. And what that does is it sort of makes it not, I don't know, it brings it out of the shadows. And it's another tool that we can use to prepare our communications, and to prepare the things that we're writing or whatever we're doing. And if you use it, you should cite it, just like if you cite some sort of source. Also, some of my colleagues, we ask students to not use ChatGPT for certain assignments. And there's ways to structure assignments that you might not have them do that. In a language arts classroom, for example, in-class writing is the most obvious way that would be hard for them to use ChatGPT. I also think there's other ways. I also think it's important for us to resist any efforts to simply police it and outlaw it. And why? Because honestly, I think it's an unwinnable arms race. We're not going to be able to outlaw it. Currently, I know like turnitin.com is developing tools to help us, identify what was generated by ChatGPT. Currently, it has a very high false positive rate, which means turn it in, and actually you can ask ChatGPT as well. You can go to ChatGPT and say, did you write this? And then put something in quotation marks. And well, ChatGPT will tell you it wrote it way more often than it actually did. So you could take something that you wrote. Some of my colleagues have done that. You put it in and ChatGPT says, yes, I wrote that. It's like, no, you didn't write that. I wrote that 15 years ago. And there's a very high false positive rate, which is not the best sort of atmosphere to create in your classroom where you're constantly accusing students of cheating with ChatGPT. So I think it's just kind of, it's unwinnable kind of arms race. There's some other ways that we could use, or teachers can use, ChatGPT productively. Number one, we can teach students how to use it strategically. So just typing in, write me a paper about X is like using Wikipedia as your only source in a research paper. It's not going to give you much anything that's worthwhile. Or it's like only using the first 3 sources that Google search produces. One of the groups I was talking to had this very interesting discussion about how professors are going to expect the basic, from ChatGPT. You have to take that and go beyond it. And that's very similar to, remember when Google search and Wikipedia first came out and how that was going to be the end of the world when it comes to research? And now we know if you just take your first 3 sources, that's not really doing research. It's like not even bothering to run spell check on your paper, right? And so we can teach them how to use it strategically as a part of their writing process, not as a substitute for the writing process, but as a part of their writing process. And we can teach students how to use it as a starting point for their own work, or as a transformative tool, which is something I hadn't thought of until today's meeting. And it must have been because I was thinking more about student use of it. And that, students can use ChatGPT to help familiarize themselves with the genre that they're going to be writing in. And I think that's a very powerful application. They can essentially see potential outlines for what they might be writing. That sort of bigger genre knowledge is available through ChatGPT that they might not get elsewhere. This was not my original idea. In my discussions with Trinette, we were putting together, kind of the parameters for this talk. She really made an excellent point that those genre-related starting points could be a great equalizer for underserved students to teach them some genre knowledge that they don't have otherwise. And that's really a valuable, thing that ChatGPT can do as far as helping students like begin to generate content. So if you think of the writing process as identifying an audience, and you have some sort of purpose that you want to accomplish with that audience, well, how do we go about doing that? Well, those of us who are expert communicators and writers, well, we have genre knowledge. A lot of it's implicit genre knowledge, but we know what we need. We need a press release, or we need a tweet, or we need to write an argument, or we need to write an apology. We sort of have a sense of those genres, which a lot of times our students don't. And this tool can be used to help them get a sense of the genre. We can also use the fact of ChatGPT. This is me phrasing something that some teachers might be annoyed about in a very positive way. ChatGPT is going to force us to change some of the ways we teach. There's no two ways about it. And as I told one group, one of my favorite jokes, and I am a college English professor, one of my favorite jokes is, how many English professors does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is change. We don't want to ever change anything. And the fact of its existence is going to motivate us to improve and change our teaching. Number one, it should encourage us to move beyond acontextual rote learning. So if we develop more process-based and context-dependent assignments, there you go. There's some AI proofreading my slide and taking my ore and turning it into the kind of ore that we're going to mine out of the mountains, or multimodal and original assignments that go beyond just asking students, hey, what did I tell you? Or what did the textbook say? There's sometimes it's easy to just simply tell students something and then ask them to tell it back to you on a paper. The existence of ChatGPT, which can do that for you very efficiently, will encourage us as teachers to kind of develop more process-based and context-dependent assignments, which research has shown is in high impact practice, and students actually learn more from those things. So in some ways, it's a win-win situation. Another thing that we can do as teachers is we can emphasize the idea that ChatGPT is actually going to raise the bar for students. I think some students right now are like, sweet, we are ahead of the teachers on this one. We got this tool that's going to help us do less work and still get the grades, and good for me. But no, eventually it's going to actually just raise the bar, because if ChatGPT is out there and can generate this level of content, well, you need to do something more with it. You got to apply your mind and your imagination to offer something more, something better, something that you can do with ChatGPT's prompts or its basic ideas or its output. And this is my philosophical thought. And having visited some groups, some of us are old enough to be more familiar with this, and some of us are young enough to be a little less familiar with this. But remember it's probably about 15, 20 years ago, the talk, especially in library studies and among librarians, is it moved from talking about teaching students how to do research into talking about information literacy. Okay, that the dawn of information literacy came about because suddenly information was everywhere, right? And what we needed to do is teach students how to use the information and to sift through the information, to search the information. I think there's a potential broadly speaking, that the same thing is going to happen with generative AI and artificial content development, which I'll call my generative artificial content literacy. So before the internet, information was scarce and more difficult to come by. After the internet, information's everywhere, and students need to learn how to sift through it and use it productively, ethically, and judiciously. That, in some ways, was at the bottom of information literacy. I think a similar thing might happen with AI and generative content, that we'll need, that there will be these kinds of changes, and we should embrace them the same way that we've embraced information literacy. Because before ChatGPT, content was difficult and labor intensive to produce. Now it's everywhere. It's easy to produce. Students are still going to need to learn, though, how to sift through it and use it effectively, ethically, and also judiciously. And then how can students productively and ethically use ChatGPT? Well, as a start to their own work. It's a big head start, but in some ways it's not unlike using Google search to get your research going. They can familiarize themselves with the genre they're going to be writing in, and they can see potential outlines or ways they might go about doing their work on almost a bigger discourse level scale. And like I said, I think a simple policy to initiate is always cite their use of ChatGPT, just like you're citing a source when you got yourself an idea. Finally, and these are just some basic ideas I've come up with, and then we'll spend the last probably 10 minutes sharing other ideas that have occurred to you. This is a question of, so how can school communicators talk about ChatGPT? And one thing that we can do is we can explain how it works. And I know a lot of that kind of came up in the groups and in the sharing, this idea of you explain it and have people try it. It removes some of the mystery behind the technology. And it also sort of explains to people that doesn't actually think, it imitates. And one of my colleagues called it Mad Libs on steroids, is what ChatGPT is. It's an imitative and predictive model that doesn't actually think. But it's useful to kind of demystify it for people and not think, oh no, it's like Terminator. It's like Terminator for term papers. Instead, it's an interesting, valuable tool, but it is, it has its limitations. We can also talk about ChatGPT, about how it's some ways just another communication technology in a long line of technologies, like pen and ink, like printing presses, like pencils, like typewriters, like computers and spell check and Google search and Wikipedia. One of the groups that I talked to during the breakout session, I was telling them about this, but did you know that writing itself, the act of literally recording things in some form, I think it was pictographs originally, was met with great suspicion. A lot of the great thinkers of the time, one of their initial concerns was that writing was going to ruin our memories. That as human beings, if we could write things down, our memories would just become no good anymore. So you don't have to remember anything, because we could write everything down. We can also talk about it as an evolving technology that we're going to respond to, and one that is going to inevitably change things. And I think we can embrace the fact that it's going to change things. We don't know how. We'll find out. It's a tool. We'll learn how to use and adjust to it. Just like keyboarding ruined handwriting and spell check is ruining spelling, Google and Wikipedia have ruined research. Well, this is going to change things. We're not exactly sure how. There's a book that I recommended to one of the groups. It's called Orality and Literacy, where the author made the argument that writing itself, did ruin our memories or changed our memories, and also changed our consciousness. That the rise of writing allowed for abstract thinking to develop in a way that oral culture didn't allow for abstract thinking to be a part of our consciousness. So yes, it will change things, and we don't quite know how it will, but hey, we're going to keep responding to it and working with it. And it's, in the line of other technologies. We'll brainstorm together. Finally, here's the resources. So those were the 2 New York Times articles. So if you want to watch an AI learn by, Jane Austen or Shakespeare, whatever you want, you can click on that. We did a set of programming through the Writing Across the Curriculum program, which is the first set of was the first link there. There's a great resource page on there. It's a PDF file that you can download. It's maybe 4 or 5 pages long, just full of links about chatbots and AI. And then our Center for Faculty Development has also come out with some AI and ChatGPT resources, some of them including some basic policies that are starting to be developed at other universities. So that information is available for you. That's it. Thank you. We'll have some chatting with each other, and we'll run it the way we did before. And my little joke is not ChatGPT, but chat for real. And thank you so much.
And Gina will email out the presentation to everyone that registered.
As well as a copy of all the stuff that was put in the chat. So we have 10 minutes if anyone has any questions or comments or commentaries or editorials, anything you'd like to share.
I'd like to share something that we talked about in our group. I had shared that in a former role, I had written a message about something I didn't have a lot of knowledge on. It was on a religious holiday. And had done quite a bit of research on it and put out the message for my superintendent. Some of the high school students had put the message into one of the AI indicators, and it had come up that it was AI generated. It wasn't AI generated, as you mentioned, the false positives. I think a lot of it was the same words and phrases that are used to talk about this holiday. But an interesting question was asked in the group. Should I have been offended that it was AI generated, that they assumed it was AI generated? And how can we respond to this? So how, as districts and county offices, do we say we utilize AI to make our messages better, or we use AI, or we don't use AI? Do we share that publicly? And how is, what is the perception in the general public of how AI is being used? Is it, a lazy tool, or is it, wow, you're really smart that you're utilizing this? Because I had no idea how to respond. I was flummoxed because I didn't use it, and I didn't know the next steps of how to respond. That's
an excellent question. I really don't know. I think the current general perception is that if you use it, you're being lazy. That's the general perception. I think that's going to change, though. I mean, I think it's like spell check. It really, if you were to put out a message that's full of spelling errors, people would be like, why didn't you spell check? But yeah, I mean, are there other opinions on that, of how it's perceived? Does anyone share out that they utilize AI to edit messages or generate messages or put together thoughts? I wonder. No. This is why we're talking. Yeah, it's interesting. It really is almost like our little secret right now. Yeah. So
Jessica,
go ahead.
It's going to be a learning curve. I think I agree that it may take a little while, but it's going to become as much part of us as spell check and any of these other things. But I think it's how we as communicators do our job in introducing this not only to within our district staff, but our families. And I can see that school publications, whether there's social media or whether we still, God forbid, have any print pieces left among the districts, this is a subject that you may want to do maybe a little series of updates. Here, this is what it is, and here's how we're using it, and here are the benefits of it. So that's something that maybe we could all think about.
Yeah, that's great. And Kendra shared in the chat that she doesn't share that she utilizes Canva to create a graphic design piece. But if someone asked her if she used it, she would of course say, yes, I used it, right? So yeah, that's great. Go ahead.
That's kind of my hunch, as I'm listening to the conversation. If I were asked, and if I didn't, I'd say no, and if I did, I'd say yes, and here's how I used it. I would
Yeah.
explain how I used it, because in my case, I would never just say, hey, write me this thing and then send it out. And I don't think any of us would. Instead, we'd use it for this, use it for that. And I'd say, yes, and blah, blah, blah. In some ways, and now we're going to have a meta moment. I promised a meta moment for you. Notice how in my presentation, I did use AI and I signaled to you every time that I did. Did that take away from my credibility?
Not with us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think eventually it's going to be like spell check or a keyboard or a computer. It'll almost be like, oh, Jessica, did you use a computer to make that message? Why, yes, I did. Yeah. We had in the chat some people who wanted to say something. Their name was listed as SRCS Commune.
Yeah, just like we have so many different email names, I also have so many different Zoom accounts, so I never know which one's going to pop up. Hi, Christina Perino. A lot of it's what's similar to being discussed, but you could say we're one of those districts, really without the leadership knowing that it was just initially blocked as a reaction several months ago. And I would like to get us to the place to walk that back strategically and smartly. Obviously, we just have a few more weeks of school left. And it was from the teacher side making those requests, and our IT department just obliged. So I think it's similar to just slowly putting out some communication and messaging like we've discussed, and gaining that acceptance. But if there's any other specific tips, or if anybody else has been through that experience where they blocked it and now want to start to embrace it and have those policies and practices around using it.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anyone else who had a comment, question, or an editorial?
This is Dennis. First of all, let me say hi to Vic, from one golden mentor to another.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi. Some of this discussion, I feel a little bit like we're chasing our tails, because as soon as we figure out something, it's going to be obsolete. So a lot of this discussion is very interesting. And I think if we have the same discussion a year from now, there'll be a whole new level of issues and ethics and policy concerns to be discussed. So it's not it's an evolving story with many chapters still to be written.
I agree. It's interesting to hear you say that, Dennis. It reminds me, my dean. So we all remember the pandemic, right? The joyful, especially 2020 and 2020 to 2021 school year, where we kept having to pivot all the time and we never knew what we were going to do. My dean described it as, we're building the airplane in flight. And you describing it that way just reminded me of that's what we're doing with ChatGPT and generative AI. Trying to build the policies and procedures and stuff as we're going. Cool. If there are no more questions or comments, thank you very much for joining me today. This has been wonderful. And like I said, I'm gonna steal a bunch of your ideas and share them with my colleagues. And tell them that I'm just a genius. I thought of everything myself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moriarty. I think that this started a conversation that we will definitely continue. And we are going to be sending out an invitation to our members for part 2 in this 3-part series very soon, as well as a full CalSPRA programming calendar for the 23-24 school year. I see Trinette's face, like that's not done yet, but we're getting there. And I think this is just a really important topic that we continue talking about. And as we saw with the pandemic, we have the power to shape a lot of these messages. So how we share this with our communities goes far and wide in how it's perceived. So let's continue talking about it. Please join us tomorrow on May 26th, Friday, May 26th, from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. for our office hours. If someone comes in without a topic, I'm guessing the topic will be AI. might be. So please join us. You can sign up for that on calspra.org. I thank you all for joining us and hope you have a wonderful day and a safe and happy holiday weekend.